The cold that night felt alive, like it had teeth. It crept along the empty streets, slid under collars, and wrapped itself around anything foolish enough to be outside after midnight. The young man walked with his hands buried deep in the pockets of his thin jacket, shoulders hunched, breath coming out in white clouds that vanished almost as soon as they appeared. His shift at the warehouse had ended late again. 12 hours of lifting, loading, and pretending not to notice the ache in his back had earned him just enough to keep the lights on in his small rented room. The bus had stopped running an hour ago, so he walked, counting cracked tiles on the sidewalk to distract himself from the cold. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, broken shadows. The city was unusually quiet, as if even the noise had surrendered to the freezing night. That was when he noticed the car. It stood half pulled over near the curb, hazard lights blinking weakly, orange flashes cutting through the darkness like a slow heartbeat. Steam rose from under the hood, twisting into the icy air. For a moment, the young man hesitated. He was tired. His fingers were numb. He still had almost a mile to walk. People always warned him not to stop at night, not to get involved in strangers' problems when you barely survived your own. Then he saw the old man. He stood beside the car, wrapped in a long coat that looked far too light for the weather. His shoulders trembled, whether from the cold or exhaustion, it was hard to tell. One hand rested on the open hood as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. The sight pulled something tight inside the young man's chest. He thought of his grandfather, gone years now, and how he used to say the cold was unforgiving to old bones. Without fully deciding, his feet changed direction. "Car trouble?" the young man asked as he approached, his voice rough from the cold. The old man turned, surprise flickering across his lined face before softening into relief. "Seems so," he replied calmly, though his lips were slightly blue. "It just stopped." The young man peered into the engine bay. He wasn't a mechanic, not officially. But growing up poor teaches you things school never does. He'd learned how to coax life out of broken machines because paying someone else wasn't an option. He rubbed his hands together, then leaned in, ignoring the sting as the metal burned cold against his skin. "You mind if I take a look?" he asked. "Please," the old man said. "I'd be grateful." The young man set his worn backpack down and focused, blocking out the cold as best he could. He checked the battery, the cables, listened to the engine when the old man tried to start it again. The wind cut through him, slicing past his jacket, numbing his fingers until they barely felt like his own. Still, he worked carefully, teeth clenched, breath steady. As minutes passed, the old man watched quietly. "You didn't have to stop," he said gently. "It's a terrible night." The young man shrugged. "Didn't feel right walking past." That was all he said, as if the explanation were obvious. Finally, he spotted the problem, a loose connection, small but enough to shut everything down in this kind of weather. He tightened it as best he could, then stepped back. "Try now." The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. The sound felt almost miraculous in the silent street. The young man laughed, a short, surprised sound. "There you go." The old man's face lit up. "You did it," he said, genuine warmth in his voice. He reached into his coat. "Let me at least." "No," the young man said quickly, holding up a hand. "It's fine, really." The old man paused, studying him in a way that felt deeper than curiosity. Snow began to fall lightly, settling on their shoulders, softening the harshness of the night. The young man picked up his backpack, already feeling the cold seep back into his bones. "Well," the old man said slowly, "thank you. You may have saved me more than you know." The young man smiled faintly. "Get home safe." He turned and walked away, not looking back, unaware that the old man stood there long after, watching him disappear into the darkness, his eyes sharp, thoughtful, and full of quiet recognition. The car idled softly now, its engine humming like it had something to prove. Warm air finally began to push through the vents, fogging the windshield, but the old man didn't drive off right away. He lowered the window instead, letting the cold rush back in, as if he needed to feel it one last time to remind himself how close the night had come to ending badly. The young man stood by the curb, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, already preparing to continue his long walk home. "You sure you won't take anything?" the old man asked again, holding his wallet loosely in one hand. His voice was calm, but there was something searching in it now, something more than polite gratitude. The young man shook his head. "I'm sure." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Snow drifted down in thin, quiet flakes, collecting on the roof of the car and clinging to the young man's jacket. The city felt suspended in time, as if it were holding its breath along with them. "At least let me give you a ride," the old man said. "It's too cold to be walking." The young man hesitated. Accepting help always felt harder than giving it. He was used to being the one who managed on his own, who didn't owe anyone anything. But the wind cut through him again, sharper this time, and his feet ached from the long hours on concrete floors. He nodded once. "All right, just a short one." He climbed into the passenger seat, cradling his hands near the heater vents. The warmth felt almost overwhelming, and he hadn't realized how deeply the cold had settled into him until it began to loosen its grip. The old man drove slowly, carefully, as if the icy roads demanded respect. They didn't speak at first. The radio played softly, an old song, the kind the young man had heard before but never really listened to. Eventually, the old man glanced over. "Where are you headed?" "Just a room near Maple Street," the young man replied. "Nothing fancy." The old man nodded. "Work late?" "Always," the young man said with a small smile. "Warehouse job. Pays the bills, mostly." "And before that?" the old man asked, not prying, just curious. The young man shrugged. "This and that, whatever keeps me moving forward." The old man listened closely, eyes on the road. "You don't sound bitter." "What's the point?" the young man replied. "Doesn't make the cold any warmer." That earned a quiet chuckle. "You're wiser than you think." As they drove, the old man asked about his childhood, about whether he had family. The young man answered honestly. His parents were gone. Opportunities had been few. He'd learned early that life didn't hand out fairness evenly, so you made do with what you had. Still, he spoke without self-pity, as if these were simply facts, not wounds. The old man's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. He had met countless people in his life, employees, partners, rivals, many of them polished, ambitious, and hungry. But there was something different about this young man. No rehearsed lines, no expectation of reward, just a quiet steadiness. When they reached Maple Street, the young man pointed to a dimly lit building. "You can drop me here." The old man slowed to a stop but didn't immediately unlock the doors. He reached into his coat again, pulled out a simple business card, and held it between his fingers. There was no flashy logo, no obvious sign of wealth, just a name and a phone number. "If you ever need help," the old man said, meeting his eyes, "or if you're looking for something more than a warehouse job, call me." The young man hesitated, then took the card, more out of politeness than belief. "Thanks," he said, "I appreciate it." They shook hands. The old man's grip was firm, surprisingly strong. As the young man stepped out into the cold again, the door closed softly behind him, sealing the warmth inside the car. He watched the taillights fade into the distance, then glanced at the card under the streetlight. The name meant nothing to him. He slipped it into his pocket and headed inside, unaware that this quiet conversation, spoken on icy roads between two strangers, had already set something extraordinary in motion. Weeks passed, and life returned to its familiar rhythm. The young man woke before dawn, worked until his muscles burned, and came home to the same narrow room with its humming radiator and peeling paint. The freezing night became just another memory, one of many small moments where he had done what felt right and then moved on. He never told anyone about the old man or the broken car. There was no reason to. Kindness, to him, wasn't a story worth retelling. Then one morning, as he was pulling on his worn boots, his phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. He almost ignored it, assuming it was another wrong call or some offer he couldn't afford. At the last second, he answered. "Is this Daniel?" a calm voice asked. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "This is Mr. Harris's office. He would like to see you today." The name stirred something in his memory. His hand instinctively went to his jacket pocket, where the business card still lay, creased and forgotten. His stomach tightened. "I think there's been a mistake," he said. "I don't have any business." "There's no mistake," the voice said politely. "A car will pick you up in an hour." Before he could protest, the call ended. An hour later, a sleek black car waited outside his building, looking wildly out of place against the cracked sidewalk and faded brick walls. The driver opened the door for him, calling him by name. During the drive, the city seemed to change. The streets grew cleaner, the buildings taller, the air quieter. When they stopped in front of a glass tower that scraped the sky, his breath caught in his throat. Inside, everything gleamed, marble floors, polished metal, people in tailored suits moving with purpose. He felt suddenly aware of his cheap jacket, his scuffed shoes. A woman greeted him warmly and led him through corridors that felt more like a museum than an office. When the doors to the executive suite opened, he stopped. Behind a massive desk stood the old man from the freezing night, no longer wrapped in a thin coat, but dressed in a perfectly fitted suit. The warmth in his eyes, however, was exactly the same. "You made it," the old man said, smiling. The young man swallowed hard. I didn't know." The old man gestured for him to sit. That was the point. He explained everything calmly. How he owned the company. How he sometimes traveled without assistance or luxury, just to see the world as it truly was. That night, the broken car had been real. The cold had been real. And the choice the young man made, to stop, to help, to refuse payment, had told him more than any resume ever could. "I've spent my life building wealth," the old man said quietly. "But finding people with character, that's far more rare." The young man listened in stunned silence. "I want to offer you something," the old man continued. "A job, yes, but also an education. Training. A chance to build a future without having to fight alone." The young man's hands trembled slightly. "Why me?" he asked. "You don't even know what I'm capable of." The old man smiled. "I know exactly what you're capable of. You showed me when you thought no one was watching." Tears stung the young man's eyes, catching him by surprise. He had learned long ago not to hope too much. Hope hurt when it broke. But sitting there, in that quiet room high above the city, he felt something shift inside him. He accepted. Months later, his life looked nothing like it once had. He studied during the day, worked alongside mentors who respected him, and returned home to a better place, one with windows that didn't rattle in the wind. Yet he never forgot where he came from. He volunteered on cold nights, stopped for stranded drivers, and carried himself with the same quiet humility. And sometimes, when winter returned and the streets grew silent and white, he remembered the blinking hazard lights, the freezing air, and the simple decision to stop. He understood then that wealth hadn't changed his life, kindness had.